Welcome to the Introverted Influencer Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Van Slyke. My soul's mission on this planet is to help fellow introverts grow their online influence in a state of feminine flow and ease. While battling the woes of depression, anxiety, and even mom guilt, I've somehow managed to build a six-figure blog without the use of social media and without sacrificing my mental health. If I can do it, you can too. Hello, love. I hope that you are finding your way out of the heaviness of all of the crazy astrological happenings of the past month or so. I hope you are stepping into a lighter, airier, more relaxed way of being. But if you have not found yourself in any sort of relief from like heaviness, exhaustion, overwhelm, then it may not be just matters of astrology. And today's message, it applies to, obviously, yes, there are things out of our control that happen in life that add a lot of chaos and heaviness and overwhelm. Things can come and challenge us. But the message today is, what is our role in some of this whole like struggle bus sort of vibe? Because it's definitely a lesson that I have had to really embody this season of my life. And in the last episode, I kind of gave you an update on my blog and how Pinterest had been for, 7-8 years. It was fun and I loved it and I got great results. And then an algorithm change really, really hit me hard. And I lost 40% of my business. And that was a year ago. And I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do this. And I had to finally come to grips. Many things were going on in my personal life. And that kind of got me to this point of like, oh my God, my adrenals, like from different stressors going on in my life, like, holy shit. My body is just about to give. Like my adrenals are kaput. Like when you have been in this state of stress and struggle for sustained periods of time, like sometimes you have to look and say, okay, how am I contributing to a lot of the stress? Like certain things, I've had issues with my children. There's looming stress of like, what is AI going to do to creatives, especially in the blogging field, those kind of stressors, there's not much I can do about that. That's life, right? But what are some things that I actually can control? Well, okay, obviously Pinterest it's not a flow state for me any longer. It doesn't provide me flow because I'm not getting results and it's causing frustration. So instead of just perpetuating this struggle, this resistance, this almost like victim mentality of like, oh, woe is me, what can I do to be more empowered with this situation? This is just a small example. And finally, so I was listening to a coaching session of a group I pay to be in. And it was crazy because the story was so parallel to what I've been experiencing, but it was an artist, an illustrator, and her career had really been the source of a lot of stress. She had like massive success the following year. And then all of her clients had like dried up and she was in this struggle and like dog paddling, trying all these different things, trying to find other sources of income. And the coach asked, okay, what is different like this year versus last year? And it sounded like, the prior year when she had so much success, first of all, she wasn't in this victim mentality in the struggle bus. And she wasn't like doing a million things. It was like she was in a happy like flow state. And she wasn't trying too hard. And so basically the coach was like, okay, well, how can you replicate more of, 2022 when you were highly successful? And some of that entailed making white space, which is what I had to do. So I had to surrender over Pinterest because it's like, okay, Pinterest is not in the flow. So I'm going to hire someone. I'm taking this off my plate. I'm getting out of the victim mentality. I'm getting off the struggle bus. I'm handing it over to a professional. Well, I'm a professional too, but a specialist who has proven results. So I'm handing this over to get out of that victim mentality, the frustration. Done. Okay. And then there's an aspect of just because I can do a million things, should I? Like this particular artist, she was trying to sell courses and then trying to get clients. And then she started another business where she was doing like Airbnbs. It was too much. Her energy was split, right? And what she really wanted to do was just be an artist again. And so she was instructed like, it's going to be scary, but you're going to have to like make space for your pure channel of artistry and illustration again. And that will mean really letting go of some of the other shiny objects and the distractions. And so how I'm embodying this personally, as I mentioned, handing the Pinterest over. Something else I did, I stopped the podcast for a month. And it's not that the podcast is a huge stressor or anything, but I had to, when you're a creative, you really have to make space for ideas to flow, for your nervous system to feel safe enough to be in that creative state and not a fight or flight. And with all the stress of my business, all the shifts, and then me stepping through this, the speaking was like it was me kind of approaching my fears head on. I had altruistic intentions as well because I want to help people, but it was also like, I've got to face this fear. And that's when I did the major speaking event in 2022. But nonetheless, it is very draining to continually do things that scare you and freak you out over and over. And it takes up a lot of space. It takes up a lot of creative energy. So I guess the message today, what I had intended, if you're still in this heaviness, you don't feel relief, you feel maybe scatterbrained, like your energy is just fragmented into so many different prisms that you don't even know who you are anymore. You can't even see where you used to be so sure of your talent or your purpose. You're like, I don't know. Like, what is the universe trying to tell me here? Because everything's chaotic, everything's haywire. If you've had your energy so split, if you've been grasping at straws for so long, it may be time to simplify. What's the saying? When things aren't adding up, start subtracting. And so that's where I have been. And I have found not total and utter like relief to all of my issues, but it's been nice to have my intuition start to pop back in. And I think it's important to just ask yourself, it's like, oh, well, there's so many things going on, and you can get into this victim mode where life is just coming at you. But there has to be a point where you say, you know, number one, why am I doing this? Do I have to do this? Where's this coming from? Is this coming from ego? Is this coming from, I need to prove something? And so I'm going to keep doing it because I'm just fucking stubborn. I know for me with the Pinterest, when it was just like, I was like a dog with a bone. And I felt like even when, God, 9 months had gone by and my business was just, it was pretty scary, that when you looked at the analytics and it's like, holy shit, well, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to get through it. And I think it was ego in the sense that like, I had to prove something to myself that I could do it on my own without any help. And that's been so much of the way I've even built my blog, in all honesty, is like, it doesn't count. The success of my blog doesn't count if I've had to hire any help. And so I never, ever hired help. I mean, I would invest in I invested in a blogging coach early on. Yes, I have technical web support person that when I get into jams with my website and it's over my head, I'm like, hey, okay, I'll hire you out. But in terms of like the Pinterest thing, I had to do it on my own or it didn't count. But I think what happens is the universe will push you to a point where you do have to surrender. Where it's like, oh God, I don't have any more energy for this. Like something does have to give. And I've got to start questioning, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And so my question to you is, how can you make your life easier? Where can you clear space? Because nobody's going to clear space for you. And ease, here's the thing about living a life of ease, is that it's not going to be handed to you. You have to simplify on your own, and it hurts. And it's not always going to be like a clear-cut answer of what needs to go, because I still enjoy using the platform Pinterest. It's not like it was like stressful or hard in and of itself. Like I still pin on my own, right? But in terms of like running a business, it wasn't yielding results anymore. Just like even with this podcast, how I've had a hiatus. And it really, it was sad to say, the mental capacity, the capacity of my nervous system is completely frazzled right now. Like all hands on deck with my actual business, and anything else that's not a money-making activity just has to go right now. And yeah, like it hurt. It was confusing, but it's just what had to be done in that moment. And I say confusing because I do believe that the idea for this podcast was a beautiful manifestation that came through one day in a meditation. And I had been looking for something more than just the DIY blog. I wanted something that had more to do with mental health, since that's been such a pain point for me my whole life, depression and anxiety. And so it was so elating to finally have that written down, like what I was going to do, what my direction was. It was given to me, the Introverted Influencer podcast. And then for it to kind of at one point only be adding to one more thing on my to-do list for a while, there was sort of this grieving of, well, God, is that not what you want me to do? Is this not what I'm supposed to be doing? So that's what I'm saying. It's confusing and it hurts, but sometimes you've got to let it go. You've got to let all of the busyness go, because at the end of the day, everything we do, all of the self-development and the pursuit to be involved in a profession that lights us up. What's at the root of that? The root driver for those desires is just to feel good and to be happy, to be fulfilled, right? So if you're not living that way on a daily basis, if your day is clogged up with shit that makes you miserable, resentful, busy, distracted, overwhelmed, then what's the fucking point? Even if it looks good on paper, if it doesn't feel right, and no, it's not always going to feel great. Nothing ever does. We live in a dualistic reality. But if you get really honest with yourself, how you're spending the majority of your time in your life and how do you feel the majority of the time, and if it's not adding up, you got to let it go. You got to subtract because it's clogging. All of the bullshit activities are clogging the channels for like what truly is trying to connect with you from an authentic, fulfilling level. And so you got to get really clear on your intentions of why you're doing what you're doing. You're going to have to maybe go through a grieving process. There was a podcast I heard a few months ago, and it starts off like really inspiring. It's this woman, and she's in her 50s. She thinks her life has basically gone by her. She's never found her thing. Then she gets this idea to like start a bakery. And you think that she's coming on to this podcast and she's going to talk about all of her success with her bakery. And she said 5 months into it, she realized she was miserable as hell. She was miserable. She was stressed. She didn't even enjoy it anymore. It didn't feel good. She started to think, I don't know that this is the thing. But she said, I'd already told everybody this is what I'm doing. And she said, I didn't want to be the fool that announces to everybody, oh, this is what I'm starting. I'm going to pursue my passion. And then, 7 months, I'm still miserable. It's not clicking. It doesn't feel right. So she's just continuing to grind through just out of ego. It's just ego. She knows at a certain level, it's not the thing because she doesn't find her flow. To some degree, you should kind of find some flow at some point. But, release it if you're having those doubts. Release it if you miss it. Okay, don't fully release it. Okay, temporarily take a step back. If you're missing it, then yeah, okay. Give it a shot. If you're doing things that are just straight up out of obligation or trying to keep yourself busy or out of shame, I think that's it's more clear cut there. But if you're kind of confused about something because you think it's a manifestation that's come through and then you're like, oh God, was this really not meant to be because it doesn't feel good? It's not always going to feel good. I mean, that's just with anything, but temporarily release it. If you miss it, if you feel like you're missing out without it in your life, it might be worth a consideration. Now, I'm not talking about that with relationships because toxic relationships now, you can have moments where you miss the person, but it's not good for you. This is a little different. So there's a distinction there. But anyhow, that is just what I've had on my heart, the message. It's the lesson that my soul is trying to embody right now. And there's also something I'm struggling with as I clear space is the guilt that I'm not doing more. And it's so silly. And you have to constantly keep an eye on that and question it and ask yourself, where is it coming from? Like, why am I having guilt? Because I have 5 free minutes to sit here and get some creative downloads. It's silly, but it's just how we've been programmed. So just ask yourself, should you really be doing it? I know you can, but are you making yourself miserable by doing it? Then stop the shit, okay? Part ways. Life is too short. Clear some space. Don't let anybody make you feel lazy. Don't make toxic, masculine hustle culture make you feel like less of a person if you desire an easeful fucking life. Let's just be done with that. That is old news. And you be yourself, embody it, own what you want, own how you want to live, own how you want your day to feel. Because that's all that matters anyhow. Fuck what's on paper. Fuck what you have in the bank. Fuck what your title is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, sis. Okay. I am done with the rant today. I think we could have done like a drinking game with how many times I've said Pinterest. Maybe I should add that to the beginning and say, get your favorite drink. And every time I say Pinterest, guzzle, baby. Just to clarify here, before leaving, I'm not telling you to give up on your dreams, but I am telling you to question why you're doing something if you're feeling overwhelmed and stressed and resentful and like all of your life force energy is just gone and you're not in the flow. Everything is heavy. You don't even have intuition. You don't even have downloads anymore. You don't even have your confidence, your groove, your mojo. It is time to start subtracting things. Subtract the shit that's from ego, from obligation. I mean, obviously, if you got to pay bills, you're going to have to make money because that's survival, but other things. How can you make it simpler? Okay. Also, I forgot to finish the story about the lady that I was telling you on the podcast at the bakery. So yeah, it wasn't that she was on sharing how she'd had success with this bakery. It was sharing. She was giving people permission. If you are way into something and you've announced it, I'm pursuing this is the thing. And then you get into it and you hate your day to day for like sustained periods of time. Okay. Yes. Like businesses, entrepreneurship, it's like a romantic relationship. You're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. But if it's sustained shittiness, you don't feel good and deep down it's not the thing, then don't keep forcing it just because you would feel like an idiot if you had to like tell people like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. That wasn't the thing. Or like if you would feel disappointed in your own spiritual like intuition for maybe receiving a message you thought you were directed to do by your guides or your angels or God to pursue something that ends up, I don't know, maybe it was just a dead end or maybe it just taught you something in order to get to that next level. But that thing wasn't the ultimate thing. Whatever. The end of the day, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Okay? Okay. I am sending you all the good, flowy, yummy, airy vibes for the rest of your day. Thank you so much for stopping by this week. I make no money from this show. Actually, it costs me money to produce and host. So the best way you can show your support for this passion project of mine is by leaving the show a 5-star written review on Apple. Also, if you would like to contribute monetarily to the show, you can leave a tip in my digital tip jar, which I have the link in the show notes. You can always share it with a friend who you think could benefit from the message, or even better, you can take a screenshot of this episode, upload it to your Insta stories, and tag me in it at Designing Vibes. Sending you my love.